This story took place when I was 20 years old and living in New Hampshire at my parents' house. I had been back home for a little over a month now, after a defunct experience at a college in Boston that wasn't the right fit for me. In the meantime, I was taking classes at a local community college. Anyway, going from living in Boston for a semester and having total independence, as well as almost endless opportunities for fun with other cute gay guys like myself, to back with my parents in rural New Hampshire was a huge knockback, and I was seeking thrills in the meantime to numb the pain. Sometimes, I have an almost ravenous sexual appetite, which was hard to satisfy in New Hampshire. I used gay hookup websites such as Manhunt and the app Grindr to meet other like-minded guys in my area. Not surprisingly, these sites and services come with their fair share of creepers, but I honestly never found myself threatened when they reached out, just sort of flattered and then would take comfort in the fact that I could easily block them. The problem occurred when some guys couldn't take a hint though, and there was one in particular that kept attempting to contact me under different usernames after I would block him. His original username was something along the lines of SoccerBoy123. His profile picture on Manhunt was of a fit-looking guy from the neck down. He reached out to me and we began chatting. He said he lived in Concord, which is roughly an hour south of where I lived, and also where my community college was located at the time. We were chatting about explicit stuff, use your imagination, and possibly meeting up, when I asked to see some pictures of him, including one of his face. He sent the pictures over. I could notice that they didn't really seem to match up with each other, not to mention his profile picture. The face picture I requested was also missing. I replied with something like, hot, and I asked him again for a picture of his face. He gave me the old, this computer is new and I don't have one on here yet line, and I said I wasn't going to continue chatting unless I saw one. He eventually caved, and he sent me a few photos of his face. I'm not shallow, but he was ugly. I wondered why he didn't continue his trend of sending fake hot pictures. The thing about him I found most unattractive was a huge mouth full of really crooked, very messed up teeth that kind of protruded out in a freakish sort of way, even with his mouth closed. I think I blocked him right away, being kind of weirded out by the whole thing, and I went along with my business. However, in the months that followed, I began receiving hostile-sounding messages from phony-looking profiles on both Manhunt and Grindr. Most of them were blank and contained little to no information about the user. The messages were tinged with a strange, bitter tone, and the sender acted like he knew me. He'd say things like, "You're a shallow little prick," "You're fucking ugly inside," and "Someone's gonna teach you a lesson someday." They actually really started to creep me out after I repeatedly blocked the person, and they would come back with another blank profile and continued to message me. I had a feeling who it was. One night, sometime around early March I believe, it was getting late, and I was feeling kind of horny, so I turned on Grindr and I started browsing. I messaged this one guy without a picture, but some stats like a football player. My philosophy is that I can always ask for a face picture after I say hello, because some guys are very closeted. We began chatting. We exchanged pictures, and he seems not only legitimate, but hot. We discussed meeting up, and he says he lives in Concord. Well, it's getting really late. Concord is an hour away, and it's fucking freezing out. It's still very cold during March in New Hampshire. I was not thinking with the head on my shoulders though, so I got dressed, pulled on my parka, and hopped in my car to make the hour-long drive. We continued to chat using Grindr on my way down, but as I neared the city and began asking exactly where to go, the conversation took a weird turn. He gave me an address, but said that he wanted me to wait outside because his parents were asleep, and that he was going to sneak downstairs to unlock the door. Then, he would go back in his room and text me when it's unlocked, so that I could walk in and up to his room on the right. This was the strangest set of instructions I had ever received. But what was even more strange was that he didn't want me to turn on a single light as I walked into his house, up the stairs, and then into his room for fear of waking up his parents. At this point, I've already parked the car on the populated yet entirely dead street, and I began counting the ascending numbers to the house. I find myself in front of a large, blue Victorian house that needs a little taking care of, with no light coming from any of the windows. Now I am creeped out. I message him and let him know that I'm outside, and I wait for some sort of light to come on. He tells me to wait, because his dad just got up to get a drink or something, but no lights come on in the house. I am getting seriously creeped out and impatient while waiting, and decide to tell him I'm leaving. I start walking, and all of a sudden, he reveals to me that he gave me the wrong address, and that I should be at X number on X street instead. I'm feeling beyond weirded out, and actually kind of pissed off. I was just standing outside of this random house for 10 minutes in the cold and dark night, only to find out he deliberately gave me the wrong address. I honestly want to go home now, but my other head is really banking on the possibility of this being good, and I just drove a fucking hour, so I pull out my iPhone and mapped it out. It didn't take me long to realize the new address was in my line of vision and sat across the street at a small intersection that led to more houses. I moved towards the house. This one, a large white colonial house with green shutters and an orange street lamp that shined down upon it. I let him know that I'm outside, although no lights are showing through the windows. This time, he says the door is unlocked. He wants me to come upstairs in the dark and enter his room. Then, feel for a mattress and get down on it. He says he wants me to just feel what's happening instead of seeing it, and assures me it will be so hot. Fuck no, I think, beginning to give in to the impending fear taking hold of me. But in a last-ditch effort from my other head, I give him an ultimatum. Either come down here, open the door, and let me in with the lights on, or I'm leaving. He says he'll comply, and I wait, now excited for this hot, straight football player to come and open the door. I stare with a shaky, adrenaline-fueled gaze at the door for what seems like forever when I sense movement. Yes, he's actually coming down. The door pushes slowly outward, and that's when I saw, emerging from the darkness, his face, his teeth, washed in the orange light from the street lamp. This was not who I thought I was meeting. An icy, stabbing chill washed over me as we made eye contact, and he gestured for me to come inside. I knew who this was. This was the man who has been contacting me. I looked at him and yelled, "No! Fuck no!" And I started half running, half walking away from the house, and back to my car. I looked back after a few seconds, and he was watching me from the door. I got to my car, and quickly got in, locked the doors, and sped home. This happened about a year ago. I'm a 30-year-old white male, and this is in the Deep South. I had relocated to Georgia from Texas about 6 months prior to take a higher paying position within my company. I had managed to make a few good friends in the short time I'd lived there. It was the first Friday of the month in November, which was a pretty big deal in this city. All the bars downtown had drink specials, live music, and events scheduled for First Friday. Downtown was relatively crowded considering how cold it was out. I met a couple of friends at a local punk bar, and we started drinking. One of my friends, Adam, was going through a separation and inevitable divorce, and was pretty upset about it. After a few hours of heavy drinking, I decided to part ways with my friends and head a few blocks down the main street to a different bar. It was a little after midnight, and there were still quite a few people roaming the streets. As I was entering the next bar, I ran into Adam's wife, Becca. She was out with a couple of girlfriends, and she told me she was heading to the bar I had just left. As soon as she left, I immediately called Adam to give him a heads up. I had a few more drinks and talked to some people I knew casually. Before long, the lights came on, and I closed my tab and started preparing for the walk back. I decided to call my friends and try to get a ride, as I felt like I was just a little too drunk to drive home safely. They told me to meet them in front of the first bar, and they would drive me home. On first Fridays in this city, you could take your drinks out of the bar and onto the street as long as you pour them into a solo cup. Most of the bars had a stack at the door before you exited. I poured the rest of my beer into a cup and headed out the door. I was about halfway back to the first bar when I ran into Becca again. She was very drunk and had obviously been crying. She started asking me questions about Adam. Did he say anything about me? Do you think he still loves me? Etc. I tried to calm her down without getting too involved when a man walked out of the shadows and stood about a foot from us like he was part of the conversation. This guy was obviously drunk. He was holding a blue solo cup, so I figured he must have just left the bar too. He was tall, about 6'2", and relatively clean cut. His eyes were a little crazy, to the point that I believed he may have been on some other drugs as well. We tried to ignore him, and for about a minute, he says nothing. Finally, he asked what I was drinking. I was still holding the solo cup I got when I left the bar. I told him I was drinking beer. He raised his cup, and we drank. I shrugged him off as just being an annoying drunk. But then he started getting into our conversation. "Is this your boyfriend?" he asked Becca. "Yes," I said, sensing that she was feeling uneasy. He had been inching closer to her. Adam's wife was very attractive and dressed for a night out. Although annoying, I didn't think it was particularly odd that some drunk asshole was trying to talk to her. We again tried to carry on our conversation, hoping this guy would get the hint and leave when out of the blue, he said, "You can do better." That was about all I could take. I said, "Fuck you," and started taking my jacket off. I was pissed. This guy takes off running down the street and I follow. Becca is trailing behind me, telling me to stop, and it's not worth it. She was right. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, a taxi cab pulled up to the curb, right in front of this guy, and he hops in with me still running after him. I grabbed the open door and told him to get out. He started yelling at the confused taxi driver, "Go!" Becca catches up and grabs my arm and tells me again to stop. I turn around, and for the split second it takes to look at her, this guy leans out of the car and throws his drink in Becca's face. Now furious, she starts punching him wildly as I grab the door and jam and kick this guy in the face. The taxi driver peels out and leaves Adam's wife and I standing in the dust. She is soaking wet and very pissed. I gathered up my jacket and put it on when she screamed. I turned around and she said, "It's piss. It's fucking piss." The drink he had thrown in her face that was covering her clothes, face, and dripping from her hair was urine. This guy had given me cheers with that cup, and I watched him drink a mouthful of it. Crazy drunk, piss-drinking guy. Let's not meet. Today's video is brought to you by MoviePass. If you want to be like me and see all the latest releases while they are still playing at your local theater, then visit my affiliate link for MoviePass. MoviePass has no blackout dates, and you can see a new 2D release every day, including opening night, for one low monthly price. Upper tier plans support 3D and IMAX screenings. Visit my affiliate link to learn about America's #1 movie subscription service, which is accepted at 98% of theater locations in the US. Plans starting at $14.99 a month, although prices may vary by location. Check out MoviePass.